A poor Black woman is rejected for being too fat when she desperately needs a job to save her grandmother's restaurant. Walking home in the rain, she witnesses something she was never meant to see: a ruthless mafia boss executing a man in cold blood. Their eyes meet. But instead of silencing her forever, he appears at her restaurant the next day with a shocking offer: become his personal chef and live in his mansion. What begins as a dangerous prison turns into something far more complicated when she discovers his true plans. He's been watching her for months, and her restaurant sits on land he needs to destroy. But as their worlds collide, something unexpected happens. The dangerous man who controls Chicago with an iron fist begins to fall for the woman society rejected. When betrayal strikes and she's kidnapped by his enemies, shocking truths emerge. Did he really save her restaurant, or was it all an elaborate trap? And when a man who kills without mercy kneels before the woman he once planned to destroy, will their forbidden love survive the blood that's about to be spilled? Through the rain-streaked windows of Sweet Home, Imani's hands shook as she wiped down the already clean counter for the third time. The familiar scent of seasoned cast iron and her grandmother's secret spice blend couldn't calm her racing heart. Every car that passed made her flinch, the headlights casting ominous shadows across the worn linoleum floor. She touched the framed photo of her grandmother, the glass cool against her trembling fingers. "What would you do, Gran?" she whispered. The wise face in the photo offered no answers, just the same warm smile that had guided Imani through countless childhood troubles. But witnessing a murder in a dark alley was far from a childhood problem. The evening storm showed no signs of letting up. Thunder rolled overhead as Imani moved through her closing routine, muscle memory taking over while her mind replayed the scene in the alley. The man's expensive suit, probably worth more than 6 months of her rent. The casual way he'd held the gun, like it was an extension of his hand. But most of all, those eyes, steel gray and penetrating, showing neither mercy nor malice as they met hers. She should be terrified. Any rational person would be. But beneath her fear lurked something else. Anger. Anger at Bradley Wilson's sneering rejection earlier that day, at the snickering staff, at every door that had been closed in her face because of how she looked. Anger at a world where men in $1,000 suits could take lives, while people like her grandmother worked themselves to death trying to keep their dreams alive. Imani jumped at a particularly loud crack of thunder. The register drawer stuck as she tried to close it, a familiar frustration. Just like the leaking roof, the temperamental oven, and dozen other repairs she couldn't afford. She glanced at the eviction notice crumpled in her apron pocket. 30 days. The weight of it felt like a stone in her stomach. The dining room lights flickered, and Imani held her breath until they steadied. A power outage was the last thing she needed tonight. She moved to check the circuit breaker, passing the wall of family photos. 4 generations of Jacksons had kept Sweet Home running, serving up comfort food and community in equal measure. Her great-grandfather had opened the place with nothing but determination and her great-grandmother's recipes. Now it was slipping through Imani's fingers. In the kitchen, she ran her hand along the smooth wooden handle of her grandmother's favorite cast-iron skillet. The seasoned surface still held years of flavors, memories of Sunday dinners and holiday feasts. Imani had learned to cook standing on a step stool beside the stove, soaking up her grandmother's wisdom along with the techniques for perfect fried chicken and flaky biscuits. "Your food tells your story," Gran always said. "Put your heart on the plate, and people will taste the love." But love didn't pay the bills. Neither did talent, apparently, when it came wrapped in a package that didn't fit society's narrow standards. Imani's culinary school instructors had praised her innovative takes on traditional soul food. Her technical skills were impeccable, her palate refined. None of that had mattered to Bradley Wilson. All he'd seen was her size, her skin color, everything that didn't fit his precious image. The memory of his dismissive glance made her grip tighten on the skillet's handle. She forced herself to set it down gently. Violence wouldn't solve anything, even if the thought of introducing Bradley's head to her grandmother's cast iron held a certain appeal. A flash of lightning illuminated the kitchen, and for a moment Imani thought she saw movement outside the back door. She froze, heart pounding. The security light in the alley had been burnt out for months, another repair she couldn't afford. Rain drummed against the windows, distorting her view of the darkness beyond. She should go upstairs to her apartment, lock herself in, maybe push the dresser in front of the door. Instead, she found herself moving closer to the back door, peering through the rain-streaked glass. The rational part of her brain screamed to run, but something stronger held her in place. This restaurant was all she had left of her family's legacy. She'd be damned if she'd cower in fear in her own kitchen. Thunder rumbled again, and Imani counted the seconds until the next lightning flash. 3, 2, 1. The alley lit up, empty except for overflowing dumpsters and rivers of rainwater rushing toward the storm drains. She let out a shaky breath, shoulders sagging with relief. The clock on the wall showed nearly midnight. She needed to finish closing and try to get some sleep, though she doubted rest would come easily. Tomorrow was another day of trying to make ends meet, of serving the loyal customers who kept coming back for her food, even as the neighborhood changed around them. She couldn't let fear or failure be the end of Sweet Home's story. Imani moved through the kitchen, checking pilot lights and cleaning surfaces that were already spotless, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory. "Stand tall, baby girl. Ain't nobody can take your dignity unless you give it to them." She straightened her spine, lifting her chin. She might be afraid, but she wouldn't let it show. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same strength and grace her grandmother had taught her. The morning sun filtered through Sweet Home's front windows, casting long shadows across freshly wiped tables. Imani's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee for Mr. Jenkins, her oldest regular customer. She'd barely slept, starting at every creak and rustle in her apartment above the restaurant. "You feeling okay, baby girl?" Mr. Jenkins asked, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Looking a bit pale today." "Just tired," Imani managed a smile, steadying the coffee pot. "How about some of my peach cobbler to go with that coffee? Made it fresh this morning." The breakfast rush kept her mind occupied. Muscle memory took over as she worked the griddle, flipping perfectly golden pancakes and seasoning crispy home fries with her grandmother's secret spice blend. The familiar rhythm of the kitchen almost made her forget about last night's horror. Almost. At 10:30, the bell above the door chimed. The conversation in the dining room died instantly. Imani looked up from the grill to see 3 men enter, 2 bulky figures in dark suits flanking a tall, elegant man she recognized immediately. Her heart stopped. The man from the alley. He moved with predatory grace, surveying the restaurant before selecting the corner booth with the best view of both exits. His bodyguards positioned themselves near the door, their presence making the remaining customers shift uncomfortably in their seats. Lisa, her part-time waitress, approached their table nervously. "Can I get you gentlemen something to drink?" "Coffee," the man said, his voice carrying across the quiet dining room. "And tell Ms. Jackson I'd like to speak with her." Imani's hands gripped the edge of the stainless steel prep table, knuckles white. "How did he know her name?" "Boss," Lisa's voice quavered. "He's asking for you." Taking a deep breath, Imani smoothed her apron. Fear wouldn't help her now. She walked to his table, chin high, meeting those steel-gray eyes that had haunted her dreams. "Please sit." He gestured to the opposite bench. It wasn't a request. "I prefer to stand when serving customers," Imani said, proud that her voice remained steady. A slight smile curved his lips. "I insist." His accent was barely detectable, Italian perhaps, softened by years in America. Imani sat, keeping her back straight, hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. "I'm Dante Ricci," he said, studying her face. "But you've probably figured that out by now. I make it a point to know everything about people who interest me." Lisa appeared with his coffee, nearly spilling it in her haste to retreat. "Your grandmother was an institution in this neighborhood," Dante continued, adding sugar to his cup. "Marie Jackson. Died last year. Heart attack, wasn't it? Left you the restaurant, though not in the best financial condition." Each casual word felt like a knife twist. He'd done his homework. "Culinary degree from Le Cordon Bleu Chicago, top of your class. Yet you're struggling to keep this place afloat." He took a sip of coffee, nodding appreciatively. "Excellent brew, by the way." "What do you want?" Imani asked quietly. "Direct. I like that." Dante set down his cup. "I have a proposition for you. I need a personal chef at my North Shore estate. The salary would be triple what any restaurant in Chicago would offer, plus immediate settlement of all your current debts." Imani's mind raced. This had to be about last night, about what she'd seen. "I'm not interested in leaving my restaurant," she said. "Ah, yes, about that." Dante's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I heard about your unfortunate experience at the Adler yesterday. Interesting coincidence. Bradley Wilson had an accident this morning, slipped on the grand staircase, broke both legs. Terrible thing. The threat was velvet-wrapped steel. The position comes with full creative control of my kitchen, access to any ingredients you desire, and my personal guarantee that Sweet Home will remain untouched." He withdrew an envelope from his jacket. Consider this a signing bonus. Inside was a cashier's check made out to her landlord for the full amount of her back rent. My driver will collect you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pack for an extended stay. Dante stood, laying a business card beside his empty cup. Don't disappoint me, Imani. I rarely give second chances. The bell chimed again as they left. Imani sat frozen, staring at the card until Lisa's hand on her shoulder made her jump. Boss, you okay? Who was that? No one, Imani whispered. Just a job offer. That night, after closing, Imani's trembling fingers typed Dante's name into her laptop. Each search result made her blood run colder. Dante Ricci, heir to Chicago's most powerful crime family. Suspected involvement in dozens of murders, though never charged. Legitimate businesses in real estate and high-end nightclubs. Photos showed him at charity galas and restaurant openings, always surrounded by beautiful people, always watching with those cold gray eyes. She had to run. It was crazy to think she could survive in his world. She threw clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed her emergency cash from under the mattress, and crept downstairs to get her car. The sight stopped her cold. All 4 tires were slashed. The words, "No running," had been keyed into the driver's side door. Imani sank to her knees on the sidewalk, the night air heavy with the weight of her impossible choice. Behind her, Sweet Home's neon sign buzzed softly in the darkness, her grandmother's legacy hanging by a thread. The black SUV pulled up precisely at 10, its tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. Imani clutched her small suitcase, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd barely slept, torn between fear and the stark reality that she had no choice. The driver, a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, opened the rear door without a word. Imani slid into the leather interior, inhaling that new car smell mixed with something distinctly masculine, probably the driver's cologne. They wound through Chicago's morning traffic, heading north along Lake Shore Drive. Imani watched her familiar world fade away. The bustling streets of the South Side, the gleaming towers of downtown, the trendy neighborhoods of the North Side. Finally, they turned onto a private road that hugged the Lake Michigan shoreline. The estate appeared like something from a movie. Wrought iron gates opened automatically, revealing manicured grounds that stretched for acres. Security cameras tracked their movement while armed guards patrolled the perimeter. The mansion itself was a masterpiece of limestone and glass, modern yet timeless, with sweeping views of the lake. Another suited man opened her door, gesturing for her to follow. The entrance hall soared 3 stories high, all marble and crystal, with a spiral staircase that seemed to float in midair. Ms. Jackson. A sharp voice cut through her awe. The man approaching had the kind of face that seemed permanently disapproving. His expensive suit couldn't hide the predatory way he moved. I'm Marco, Mr. Ricci's second-in-command. His handshake was brief and cold. Let me explain how things work here. He led her through the house, pointing out security features with barely concealed satisfaction. You'll be staying in the chef's quarters, adjacent to the kitchen. All meals for Mr. Ricci and his guests are your responsibility. The kitchen is fully stocked. Make a list of anything additional you need. I need to check on my restaurant, Imani said, trying to sound firm, despite her racing pulse. Marco's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your phone, please. He held out his hand expectantly. But Mr. Ricci has arranged management for Sweet Home during your stay. Your phone. Imani reluctantly surrendered her lifeline to the outside world. The chef's quarters were beautiful, she had to admit. A sitting room with plush furnishings opened into a bedroom with a king-size bed and views of the lake. The bathroom was bigger than her apartment's kitchen. The previous chef had unfortunate connections to a rival family, Marco mentioned casually, watching her reaction. He disappeared quite suddenly. I'm sure you understand the need for discretion. Left alone, Imani explored her gilded prison. The kitchen was a chef's dream. Professional-grade everything, ingredients that would cost a month's rent at Sweet Home. But every window was wired with sensors, every door secured with keypads. She prepared dinner despite her churning stomach. Herb-crusted rack of lamb, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. When Dante didn't appear, she covered everything carefully and retreated to her rooms. Sleep wouldn't come. Around midnight, desperation drove her to try the service entrance she'd noticed earlier. The lock clicked open surprisingly easily. Heart pounding, she slipped into the garden, keeping to the shadows of carefully trimmed hedges. Going somewhere? The voice froze her in place. Dante materialized from the darkness, moving with predatory grace. Before she could run, he had her pinned against a stone wall, his body pressed against hers. I admire initiative, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. But I've never let anything I truly want slip away. His hand slid up to cup her face, thumb tracing her lower lip. And I've wanted you since I saw those fearless eyes in that alley. Imani couldn't breathe. The threat in his voice was real, but so was the heat, the raw attraction that made her skin tingle where he touched her. Inside. Now. His hand found the small of her back, guiding her firmly through the garden. The walk back to her quarters seemed endless, his touch burning through her thin shirt. At her door, he turned her to face him. "Breakfast is at 7 sharp," Dante said softly. "I expect you to join me." His eyes raked over her face, lingering on her lips. "Sleep well, Imani." She closed the door and leaned against it, sliding down to sit on the floor. Her hands were shaking. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't just his chef. The way he looked at her, touched her, the possessive edge to his voice. She was his newest obsession. Through her window, the moon cast silver light across Lake Michigan. Somewhere out there, beyond the water and the walls and the guards, her old life seemed like a distant dream. Here, in this beautiful cage, she was caught in the orbit of a dangerous man who collected precious things and had decided she belonged to him. The morning sun sparkled across Lake Michigan as Imani carried breakfast to the terrace. She'd prepared a traditional Italian breakfast with modern touches: fresh cornetti, prosciutto, local cheese, and perfectly poached eggs with shaved truffles. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the dishes. "Join me." Dante's voice left no room for argument. He gestured to the chair across from him, his gray eyes following her movements as she reluctantly sat. "The eggs are at exactly 63 degrees Celsius," he commented, cutting into one with precision. "Perfect protein coagulation." Imani couldn't hide her surprise. "You know about molecular gastronomy. I appreciate mastery in all forms." His lips curved slightly. "Your grandmother taught you traditional techniques, but you studied modern methods at Le Cordon Bleu." The mention of her grandmother made her stomach clench. "My restaurant is being maintained by very capable people," he interrupted smoothly. "The daily receipts are quite impressive." The implied threat in his reassurance made her appetite vanish. Over the next 3 days, Imani fell into an unsettling rhythm. She threw herself into cooking, creating dishes that drew rare smiles from Dante. Each meal became an intimate performance for an audience of one, though he insisted she join him every time. The mansion operated like a carefully choreographed dance. Guards patrolled in precise patterns. Men in expensive suits arrived for closed-door meetings, emerging looking either pleased or terrified. Everyone moved aside when Dante walked past, eyes downcast. During their meals together, Imani discovered layers to him she hadn't expected. He discussed art, literature, and music with genuine passion. He asked thoughtful questions about her culinary techniques, remembering every detail she shared. Despite herself, she found their conversations increasingly engaging. The evening of the 3rd day, voices echoed from Dante's study as Imani cleared nearby tables. The heated Italian exchange made her pause. "Il territorio es nostro," a man shouted. "Questo tradimento. Basta!" Dante's voice cut through the argument like steel. More angry words followed until the visitors stormed out. Drawn by the sound of opera floating from the study, Imani approached the partially open door. Dante stood at the window, backlit by moonlight. Puccini's Nessun Dorma filled the darkness. To her shock, silent tears tracked down his face as he listened, his usual mask of control stripped away. He sensed her presence, quickly composing himself, but not before she glimpsed raw pain in his eyes. This brief vulnerability in someone so powerful left her oddly shaken. She had barely reached the kitchen when alarms shattered the night's quiet. Red emergency lights pulsed as men in tactical gear swarmed through the eastern perimeter. Gunfire erupted. "Move!" Marco grabbed her arm, dragging her toward a reinforced door. "Panic room!" Russian voices shouted from the corridor ahead. 3 masked men rounded the corner, raising weapons. A blur of motion knocked Imani sideways as shots cracked through the air. Dante's body covered hers as they hit the floor. He fired back with lethal precision, dropping the attackers in seconds. His security team converged, eliminating the remaining threats with brutal efficiency. "Sir, you're hit," one guard said. Dante's white shirt showed spreading red from his shoulder. He ignored it, pulling Imani to her feet and leading her swiftly to his study. A medic arrived to treat the graze wound while Dante remained focused on her. "The Bratva's been pushing boundaries for months," he explained, not flinching as the bullet wound was cleaned. "But this attack was too precise. They had inside knowledge of our security protocols." His intense gaze held hers. "They've seen you now! You're in deeper danger than before." "What does that mean?" Imani's voice shook slightly. Dante's expression hardened. "It means you don't leave my sight anymore." The study felt suddenly airless. Blood still stained his shirt, a vivid reminder of how he'd shielded her without hesitation. The same hands that dealt death had protected her instinctively. Like everything about him, it was a contradiction that left her unbalanced. His gray eyes hadn't left her face, studying her reaction with the same focus he brought to everything. The protectiveness in his gaze carried an edge of possession that made her shiver. She was already his captive chef. Now she'd become something more dangerous. An acknowledged weakness that his enemies could exploit. The medic finished bandaging Dante's shoulder and quietly left. In the silence that followed, the opera still played softly from hidden speakers, lending a surreal quality to the aftermath of violence. Dried blood flaked from Dante's hands as he reached for a crystal decanter, pouring 2 measures of amber liquid. He offered her 1 glass. When she hesitated, his lips curved slightly. "You look like you need it as much as I do." Imani accepted the drink, their fingers brushing. The contact sent electricity up her arm. She took a sip, the expensive scotch burning away some of her shock. Dante watched her over the rim of his own glass, his expression unreadable but intense. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar windows as Imani woke in a new suite. Her belongings had been meticulously arranged in the spacious room that shared a wall with Dante's private quarters. The connected door between their spaces made her stomach clench. "This is unnecessary," she protested when Dante appeared in her doorway, looking fresh despite the previous night's violence. "I was fine in the other room." "Security protocols have changed." His tone left no room for argument. "When you're not in secured areas, you'll be under my direct protection." The secured areas turned out to be limited to his private kitchen, where she now worked while he conducted business at a nearby desk. Phone calls in Italian and Russian filled the space as men came and went, discussing territories and shipments in careful euphemisms. Imani tried to focus on her cooking, but Dante's presence was impossible to ignore. His gray eyes tracked her movements, particularly lingering when she tested seasonings or executed precise knife work. The weight of his gaze felt physical, making her hands tremble slightly as she plated dishes. The contrast in his demeanor fascinated her despite herself. One moment he'd be threatening someone in cold, clipped tones. The next, studying her cooking with genuine curiosity. He showed different faces to different people. Brutal boss, sophisticated businessman, appreciative diner. But she began to wonder which was real. By the second evening, the constant proximity had created an almost unbearable tension. Unable to sleep, Imani slipped out to seek comfort in baking, her lifelong stress relief. The kitchen lights were already on. Dante sat at the marble island, crystal tumbler of whiskey in hand. His usual suit jacket was gone, sleeves rolled to expose strong forearms. He looked younger somehow, more approachable. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, gesturing to the stool beside him. Imani hesitated before sitting. "Baking helps clear my head." "My nonna used to bake when she couldn't sleep." A small smile softened his features. "The whole house would smell like amaretti cookies by morning." "In Georgia, my grandmother made sweet potato pie when she was worried," Imani found herself sharing. "Said you can't fret while you're focusing on getting the spices just right. Sicily or Georgia, grandmothers know best." Dante topped off his glass and poured one for her. "Tell me about learning to cook from yours." The conversation flowed surprisingly easily as midnight stretched toward dawn. They traded stories of family recipes and kitchen disasters, finding unexpected common ground in their shared love of food as connection to heritage. When Imani cautiously asked about his business, expecting deflection, Dante surprised her with candor. "Our world operates on loyalty and respect," he explained. "Family above all else. Sometimes violence is necessary to maintain order, protect what's ours. Without structure, chaos takes over and innocent people suffer more." "That's quite a rationalization for criminal enterprise," Imani observed. "Not a rationalization, reality. I don't pretend what I do is legal or conventionally moral, but there's a code we live by, rules that must be followed." He studied the amber liquid in his glass. "The moment you start lying to yourself about what you are, you lose whatever honor remains." His unflinching honesty disturbed her even as it drew her in. This wasn't a man trying to justify his actions, but one who had fully accepted his nature and choices. "These conversations," Dante's voice grew quieter, "they're the only time I feel human anymore. Not Don Ricci, not the boss, just myself." The raw admission shifted something between them. When they finally rose to return to their rooms, Dante's fingers brushed her hand in silent thanks. The brief touch sent an electric current through her body, leaving her skin tingling. Back in her suite, Imani pressed her hands to her heated cheeks. Unbidden images filled her mind. Those strong hands sliding across her skin, those intense eyes watching her come undone beneath him. She shook her head sharply, trying to dispel the thoughts. "This is Stockholm Syndrome," she muttered to herself. "He's your captor, not a potential lover. Get it together." But lying in bed, she couldn't forget the genuine connection she'd felt during their late-night talk, the way his usual masks had slipped to reveal something real underneath, the unexpected gentleness in his touch. Sleep eluded her as she wrestled with her confused emotions. Attraction to Dante was dangerous. He'd made her a prisoner, threatened her, killed without remorse. Yet she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, especially after glimpsing his carefully hidden humanity. The dawn light was starting to creep through her windows before exhaustion finally claimed her. Her last coherent thought was a worried recognition that the lines between captivity and choice were beginning to blur in ways she wasn't prepared to face. A week after the Russian attack, tension still hung thick in the mansion's air. Imani was seasoning vegetables in the kitchen when Dante appeared in the doorway, his presence commanding attention without a word. "We're having important guests tonight," he announced. "I need you to prepare a traditional Sicilian menu, something that would make a Palermo grandmother proud." Imani recognized the underlying command in his casual request. "Any specific preferences?" "Start with arancini, follow with pasta alla norma, then pesce spada alla ghiotta." His knowledge of regional cuisine surprised her. These men appreciate authenticity. They need to see. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "They need to understand the quality I surround myself with." Throughout the day, security teams swept the grounds repeatedly. Black SUVs with tinted windows delivered additional guards who took positions throughout the estate. The heightened vigilance made Imani's hands shake slightly as she formed perfect rice balls and prepared her sauces. She overheard Marco speaking in harsh whispers to the security team near the kitchen. "Watch Salvatore Vitale especially. He's unstable, unpredictable. Don't let him wander the property alone." The name meant nothing to Imani, but the fear it generated in hardened security men sent chills down her spine. She focused on her cooking, letting the familiar motions calm her nerves as she constructed each elaborate dish. When evening arrived, Imani changed into a crisp chef's coat before service began. The dining room hummed with masculine voices, speaking mixed English and Italian as she presented the first course. 5 men in expensive suits sat around Dante's massive mahogany table, all eyes following her movements as she explained each dish in professional terms. The arancini drew appreciative murmurs. The pasta course earned actual praise, but when she presented the swordfish, carefully plated with traditional capers and olives, one of the men, heavy-set with thick gold rings, spoke in sneering Italian. "Since when does Don Ricci keep fat black help in his kitchen? Times really have changed." Though Imani didn't understand the exact words, the contempt in his tone needed no translation. She kept her face neutral, but her hands tightened on the serving tray. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Dante slowly set down his wine glass. His response came in perfect Italian, voice soft but filled with lethal promise. "Careful, Salvatore. The last man who disrespected what's mine required closed casket arrangements. I'd hate to explain to New York why you won't be returning." The threat hung in the air like frost. The other men shifted uncomfortably, while Salvatore's face reddened. Dante switched smoothly to English. "Gentlemen, Ms. Jackson graduated top of her class from the Culinary Institute of America. Her expertise in both traditional and modern cuisine is exceptional. I trust her judgment in my kitchen absolutely." His gray eyes met each man's gaze in turn. "She has earned my respect. I suggest you extend the same courtesy." The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Suddenly, the men were falling over themselves to compliment the food, asking detailed questions about preparation methods. Imani answered professionally while noting how a few carefully chosen words from Dante had completely transformed her status in their eyes. Later, after the guests departed, she cornered Dante in the kitchen. "I don't need you fighting my battles for me. I've handled prejudiced men my entire career." "You shouldn't have to handle anything." His voice held contained fury. "Not in my house." "Your house where I'm basically a prisoner?" She stepped closer, anger making her bold. "Where you control my every move, but expect me to be grateful when you defend my honor. You're not—" He broke off, running a hand through his dark hair in frustration. "This isn't about control. Then what is it about?" She was close enough now to see the muscle jumping in his jaw. "Why do you care what anyone says about me?" "Because you're mine." He moved suddenly, backing her against the counter. "No one disrespects what belongs to me." Imani opened her mouth to object to being called a possession, but before she could speak, his lips crashed down on hers. The kiss was hungry, demanding, full of weeks' worth of building tension. His hands gripped her hips, pulling her against his hard body as her fingers clutched his shirt. She knew she should push him away. This man was dangerous, a killer, her captor. Instead, she found herself melting into the kiss, opening to him as his tongue swept into her mouth. He tasted of expensive wine and barely contained violence. The combination was intoxicating. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing heavily. Imani stepped back on shaky legs, her lips tingling. Confusion and desire warred inside her as she stared at him. His usual careful control was gone, replaced by raw hunger that made her shiver. "This isn't finished between us," he said quietly as she backed toward the door. In her room, Imani pressed trembling fingers to her lips, still feeling the phantom pressure of his kiss. The smart thing would be to forget it happened, to remember what he was and why she should fear him. Instead, she found herself replaying every heated second, desire coiling low in her belly despite her best intentions. She was playing with fire, and she knew it, but standing in her gilded cage, she was starting to wonder if getting burned might be worth it. Imani moved through breakfast service like a ghost, keeping her eyes down and responses clipped whenever Dante spoke. She focused on perfectly plating his usual eggs, Benedict pretending not to notice how his gaze followed her every movement. The memory of last night's kiss burned between them, making the air thick with unspoken tension. He didn't push, didn't try to corner her or demand conversation, but his presence felt like a physical touch, raising goosebumps on her skin whenever he shifted in his chair or lifted his coffee cup. Even without looking directly at him, she could feel the intensity of his attention. By mid-afternoon, Imani escaped to the walk-in pantry, needing space to think. She began reorganizing shelves, grateful for the mindless task. As she shifted boxes of imported pasta, her hand brushed something behind a loose panel. Curious, she pried it back, revealing a thick manila folder wedged in the gap. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The first page was a surveillance photo of her leaving Sweet Home, dated 3 months before she ever saw Dante in that alley. More photos followed. Imani at the farmer's market, visiting her grandmother's grave, even attending a culinary conference last year. Detailed reports outlined Sweet Home's mortgage payments, utility bills, and declining profits. Her entire life had been under a microscope. Deeper in the folder, she found copies of her culinary school transcripts, her grandmother's death certificate, even childhood photos from Georgia. But what made her blood run cold was a property development proposal. The entire block where Sweet Home stood was mapped out, with her restaurant clearly marked for demolition. Plans for a luxury high-rise filled several pages, along with projected profits and timeline estimates. Rage burned through her shock. She stormed through the mansion, folder clutched to her chest, barely registering the guards who scrambled to follow her movement on security cameras. She burst into Dante's office without knocking, throwing the folder onto his mahogany desk. Papers scattered across his laptop and neat stacks of documents. "How long?" Her voice shook. "How long were you watching me before that night in the alley?" Dante calmly closed his laptop, studying her with those unreadable gray eyes. 6 months. "The murder I witnessed. Was that even real? Or just theater to give you an excuse to take me?" "The kill was necessary business." He leaned back, loosening his tie. "The timing was convenient." "Convenient?" Imani laughed bitterly. "You were already planning to destroy my restaurant. Why not destroy my life while you were at it? That block is strategic territory. The other businesses sold willingly." His voice held a hint of admiration. "You were the only one who refused every offer, no matter how generous. I became curious. Curious enough to stalk me, to learn every detail of my life." She grabbed the childhood photos, throwing them at him. "Was any of this real? Or am I just another property acquisition?" "You became more." His intensity made her step back. "You were supposed to be a simple transaction. Instead, you fascinated me. Your strength, your dedication, your defiance." "My defiance?" Her hand found the fruit tray on his desk. Before she could think better of it, she grabbed a knife and hurled it at him. The blade whistled past his ear, embedding itself in the wooden paneling with a solid thunk. Guards burst through the door, weapons drawn. Dante raised one hand, never taking his eyes off Imani. The men retreated immediately, though she heard them take up positions outside. Anyone else would be dead for that, he said quietly, standing to approach her. What does it say about me that I find your fire more intoxicating than obedience? Imani held her ground despite her racing heart. It says you're as twisted as I feared. Hours later, pacing her room in agitation, Imani heard paper sliding under her door. She found a thick legal document with post-it notes marking signature lines. Reading through it, her hands began to shake. Every loan against Sweet Home had been paid in full. The property deed showed sole ownership transferred to her name, with ironclad protections against future development or seizure. Attached was a handwritten note in Dante's elegant script. I take what I want, but I protect what's mine. Both the property and you are now untouchable to anyone but me. Imani sank onto her bed. Document clutched to her chest. She should feel angry at his presumption, his casual claiming of her. Instead, an illicit thrill raced through her at the word, mine. His possessiveness was both infuriating and arousing, like everything else about him. She traced his handwriting with one finger, remembering the heat in his eyes when she'd thrown that knife. Any sane man would have punished such an attack. Instead, he looked at her like she was something precious and wild, a creature to be cherished rather than tamed. The smart response would be fear. She was trapped with a dangerous man who'd orchestrated her capture and now claimed ownership of her. But as she stared at the proof of her restaurant's salvation, all she felt was a confused mix of rage, gratitude, and something far more dangerous: desire. 2 weeks crawled by in a dance of avoidance and heated glances. Imani maintained rigid professionalism during their shared meals, though each brush of their hands, while passing dishes, sent electricity through her skin. Dante respected her space, but watched her with predatory patience, as if certain she would eventually come to him. One morning over coffee, Dante broke their careful routine. We're attending an event tonight, allied families gathering at the peninsula. Imani's cup froze halfway to her lips. You're letting me leave the estate? Not letting. Accompanying. His mouth curved, slightly. My security detail will ensure your safety. Hours later, a sleek-looking woman arrived with garment bags. I'm Elena, your stylist for tonight. She unzipped the bags, revealing a rainbow of designer evening wear. Mr. Ricci was very specific about the selections. Imani touched the luxurious fabrics in disbelief. These are all my size? Custom ordered, Elena smiled. High-end designers do make beautiful things for curvy women, despite what mainstream fashion would have you believe. After trying several options, Imani chose an emerald silk gown that hugged her curves before flowing gracefully to the floor. The sweetheart neckline showed just enough cleavage to be alluring without crossing into inappropriate. When Elena finished her hair and makeup, Imani hardly recognized her reflection. She descended the mansion's grand staircase feeling unusually confident. Dante waited below in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. When he saw her, his perpetual control cracked. His eyes darkened with naked hunger as they traveled slowly up her body. For the first time, Imani felt truly beautiful under a man's gaze, rather than self-conscious about her size. Stunning, he said roughly, offering his arm. The peninsula's penthouse suite buzzed with elegant danger, designer gowns and expensive watches concealing weapons and old blood feuds. Heads turned as Dante led her in, curiosity and speculation burning in every stare. These people weren't used to seeing him with anyone but his inner circle. Who is she? The whispers followed them through the crowd. Dante made introductions with deliberate vagueness. This is Imani. She's with me. The simple phrase carried weighted implications in this world, generating fresh waves of whispers. His hand remained possessively at her waist, both protective and claiming. During dinner, Imani observed the subtle power plays unfolding around her. Younger bosses postured with loud voices and flashy displays of wealth. In contrast, Dante commanded attention through mere presence, speaking softly but carrying absolute authority that made others lean in to catch his words. When discussion turned to recent Russian incursions into Italian territory, she noticed discrepancies. One capo claimed a warehouse fire was clearly Russian retaliation, while another subtly suggested inside involvement. Imani filed away these inconsistencies, her natural perception heightened by years of reading difficult customers. The evening's pleasant tension shattered when Viktor Sokolov approached their table. The Russian boss radiated cold menace beneath his polished exterior. After exchanging rigid pleasantries, his pale eyes fixed predatorily on Imani. She's exquisite, Dante. Victor's accent thickened with obvious intent. Perhaps we could arrange a temporary trade. One night with your lovely chef in exchange for certain disputed properties? The room fell deadly silent. Even the waiters froze, sensing imminent violence. Before Victor could finish his lewd gesture toward Imani, Dante moved with terrifying speed. He seized Victor's outstretched hand and slammed it against the table. The crack of breaking bones echoed through the hushed space. She is mine, alone. Dante's quiet voice carried clearly to every corner. The next man who looks at her with disrespect loses more than a hand. The proclamation's significance wasn't lost on anyone present. By publicly claiming her as his, Dante had just elevated Imani far beyond mere employee status. She was now under his personal protection, untouchable to everyone but him. The drive home passed in charged silence, Dante's fury still radiating from his rigid posture. Only when they reached his private study did Imani find her voice. "You called me yours in front of everyone," she said softly. "What exactly does that mean?" Dante crossed the room in 3 long strides. His hands cupped her face as his mouth claimed hers with unleashed passion. This kiss held none of their previous restraint, only raw need and possession. Imani melted into him, her fingers clutching his lapels as years of tension finally ignited. The kiss deepened as Dante backed Imani against the study wall, his body pressing against hers with barely contained intensity. His hands traced her curves through the silk dress, while her fingers tangled in his hair. When he finally pulled back, his gray eyes searched her face. "Are you certain?" His voice was rough with restraint. "Once we cross this line..." Instead of answering, Imani pulled him back to her mouth. Something primal awakened in him as he lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist. They barely made it to his bedroom suite, leaving a trail of discarded clothing, his jacket, her dress, his shirt, marking their path. In the soft lamplight, Imani felt a moment of instinctive hesitation as Dante's gaze traveled over her exposed curves. But where she expected the familiar flicker of judgment or hesitation she'd seen in previous lovers' eyes, she found only raw appreciation and desire. "Perfect," he murmured, pressing reverent kisses along her collarbone. "Absolutely perfect." His hands and mouth explored every inch of her body with passionate attention, treating each curve as a treasure to be savored rather than something to be hidden or overlooked. When Imani took control, rolling them so she straddled him, Dante's carefully maintained composure cracked completely. His hands gripped her hips as she moved above him, his controlled facade dissolving into expressions of pure pleasure. Their power dynamic shifted continuously throughout the night. Sometimes he dominated with passionate intensity, other times she led their dance with confident sensuality. In bed, they discovered a unique balance neither had experienced before. Imani found herself unafraid of his darkness, while Dante cherished rather than criticized her body. Each touch, each kiss, each moment of connection stripped away their usual defenses. As they lay tangled in silk sheets during the pre-dawn hours, Dante traced patterns on her bare shoulder and began speaking softly about his past. He described growing up poor in Sicily, his family struggling to maintain dignity in their small village. His voice grew rough as he recounted watching local Mafia thugs beat his father to death for refusing to pay protection money. "I was 7, he said quietly. "I still remember my mother screaming, holding me back as they killed him. She married Roberto, my stepfather, 6 months later. Everyone called it a scandal, but she did it to protect us. He was already a powerful underboss then." Imani listened as he described how his stepfather had recognized something in young Dante, a combination of intelligence, ruthlessness, and loyalty that could be shaped. "Roberto taught me to value real strength over superficial power. He showed me that true authority comes from respect, not fear alone." When Dante asked about her own past, Imani found herself opening up about growing up with her grandmother after her parents' death. "She taught me to hold my head high, even when the world tried to make me feel small," she explained. "The kitchen became my sanctuary. When I was cooking, nothing else mattered. Not my size, not others' judgment, just the pure creation of something beautiful and delicious." She described the promise made to her grandmother on her deathbed, to keep Sweet Home's legacy alive, to preserve the recipes and traditions that had sustained their family for generations. "That restaurant is more than just a business. It's my heritage, my identity." As they talked, Imani realized they had both constructed protective walls around themselves, his built of violence and power, hers of fierce independence and determination. Yet somehow, in the intimate darkness of his bedroom, those walls crumbled away. Morning light eventually filtered through the windows, bringing with it practical realities. Dante explained what his public claim on her the previous night meant. "You're under my protection now, which makes you both safer and more vulnerable. Our enemies will watch for any sign of weakness they can exploit." He stressed the importance of maintaining strategic ambiguity about their relationship. "Let them wonder if you're a weakness they can target or a calculated move they should fear. Uncertainty is its own protection." Before leaving for an early meeting, Dante handed her a sleek phone. "It's secure, linked directly to mine. You can reach me anytime." The simple gesture represented a significant shift in trust between them. After he left, Imani explored his private rooms for the first time. Each discovery revealed new layers to the man she'd just given herself to. A well-worn volume of Neruda's love poems, dog-eared and marked with notes in his precise handwriting. A framed photo of a young boy with his mother, both smiling despite their worn clothes. A carefully maintained collection of vintage vinyl records ranging from opera to jazz. These glimpses of Dante's hidden humanity both comforted and complicated her growing feelings. Each artifact told the story of someone far more complex than the brutal crime boss the world saw, someone who appreciated beauty and art even while dealing in violence and power. The morning sun filtered through the study windows as Imani reviewed surveillance photos spread across Dante's mahogany desk. She'd settled into a new routine over the past week, one that blended her culinary duties with an increasingly strategic role in Dante's organization. During business hours, she maintained professional distance, serving meals and observing meetings with careful attention. But in private moments, their passion ignited with an intensity that still surprised her. Dante entered the study, his suit jacket draped over one arm. He moved behind her chair, placing a possessive hand on her shoulder as he examined the photos. "What do you see?" "Marco's meeting patterns have changed," she said, pointing to timestamps. "He's making stops between scheduled appointments, always in areas with poor surveillance coverage." Dante's fingers tightened slightly on her shoulder. She'd first voiced her suspicions about his second-in-command 3 days ago, after noticing Marco's subtle tells during a strategy meeting about Russian territory incursions. Though Dante had initially defended his longtime associate, he couldn't dismiss her observations entirely. "We need absolute certainty," he reminded her, though his tone held less conviction than before. "Marco's been loyal for 15 years. "Loyalty can change," Imani countered, turning to face him. "And an outsider sometimes sees what those closest miss." Their eyes met, acknowledging how their own relationship had evolved. What began as captivity had transformed into something neither expected. During the day, Imani now attended select meetings as Dante's business consultant, her presence raising eyebrows, but her insights proving valuable. At night, they shared both his bed and his burdens, her perspective helping him see challenges differently. They'd implemented her suggestion to test Marco's loyalty by feeding different information to different lieutenants. Each morning, Imani analyzed reports while preparing breakfast, looking for patterns in which intelligence leaked to their rivals. She found herself fully invested in protecting Dante's interests, her earlier moral reservations about his business fading against the very real threat of betrayal. "The shipment information proves it," she said, pulling out another report. Only Marco knew that route, and within hours, the Russians had intercepted it. Dante moved to the window, his posture tense. "If you're right about Marco, the damage could be extensive. He has access to everything. Then we use that access against him." Imani joined him at the window, her hand finding his. "Let me help you set a trap he can't resist." Dante turned to her, his expression softening as it often did when they were alone. He'd begun sharing more than just information with her. He shared his doubts, his fears, the weight of decisions that affected countless lives. In turn, she found herself offering not just observations, but emotional support, becoming a true partner rather than just a strategic asset. They spent the afternoon crafting an elaborate false plan, using Imani's understanding of human nature and Dante's knowledge of criminal enterprises. She suggested subtle details that would make the deception believable, specific suppliers, timing based on Marco's known patterns, small vulnerabilities that would tempt exploitation. As they worked, Imani realized how naturally they complemented each other. Dante's tactical expertise merged with her intuitive grasp of human behavior. She no longer felt like a prisoner helping her captor. She felt like an equal participant in protecting what had become their shared world. That evening, after a private dinner in Dante's quarters, they received confirmation that their trap had worked. Information given exclusively to Marco had been intercepted by known Russian associates. Instead of immediate confrontation, Dante decided on a longer strategy to uncover the full scope of betrayal. We need to know his entire network, Dante explained as they lay in bed later, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Every contact, every deal, every weakness we can exploit. Imani curled closer, her head resting on his chest. He'll expect something after the shipment incident. We need to make him think he's still trusted. You've changed how I see everything, Dante murmured, his hand stilling on her skin. Before you, I would have handled this with immediate violence. Now I see the advantage of patience. She smiled against his chest, acknowledging how their relationship had evolved far beyond its coercive beginnings. Her skills now extended beyond the kitchen, her influence reaching into the heart of Dante's operation. She found herself thinking in terms of territory and strategy, considering long-term security rather than escape plans. Tomorrow we'll start feeding him more carefully crafted information, she suggested. Make him think his position is stronger than ever. Dante's arms tightened around her. You're remarkable, you know. You've adapted to this life in ways I never expected. Imani considered how true that was. She'd moved from unwilling captive to willing participant, from observer to active player in Dante's world. The moral lines she once thought absolute had blurred, replaced by more complex understanding of power and protection. In the quiet darkness of their bedroom, she acknowledged that she no longer planned escape routes from Dante's world. Instead, she planned how to secure their position within it. The realization should have frightened her, but instead it felt like finally, accepting a truth that had been building since that first night in his kitchen. Dante paced his study, an uncharacteristic display of nervous energy that caught Imani's attention. She'd never seen him this unsettled, not even during business confrontations. My sister Sophia arrives this afternoon, he announced, straightening items on his desk that were already perfectly aligned. She's flying in from New York. Imani set down the coffee she'd brought him. You seem nervous about this visit. Sophia's opinion matters, he admitted. She's the only family I completely trust. His gray eyes met hers. The only person besides you. The gravity of that statement hung between them. Before Imani could respond, the estate's security system announced an arriving vehicle. Through the study window, they watched a sleek black car pull up to the mansion. Sophia Ricci emerged like a fashion magazine cover come to life. Designer clothing, perfectly styled dark hair, and the same striking gray eyes as her brother. Her sharp gaze immediately found them in the window, assessing with an intelligence that reminded Imani of Dante's strategic calculations. Lunch was served in the sunroom, tension simmering beneath polite conversation. Sophia's questions came like precise knife strikes, probing Imani's background, education, and ambitions. Though her tone remained courteous, her intent was clear. She was investigating potential threats to her brother. When Dante's phone buzzed with an urgent business matter, Sophia waited until he left the room before dropping her sophisticated facade. Let me be direct, she said, setting down her wine glass. Many women have tried to use my brother for his money and power. Some have been quite clever about it. All have failed. Instead of defensive protests, Imani met Sophia's gaze steadily. I never chose this life, she said quietly. It chose me the night I witnessed something I shouldn't have in an alley. I spent weeks terrified, then angry, then confused as I saw different sides of your brother. She gestured to their elegant surroundings. This world still frightens me sometimes. I question the morality of his business daily. But I've also seen the man beneath the monster everyone fears. Intelligent, complex, capable of surprising tenderness. Imani straightened in her chair. I have my own legacy to protect, my grandmother's restaurant, my culinary career. Being Dante's woman isn't my ambition, it's just part of who I've become, as unexpected as that is. Something shifted in Sophia's expression, respect replacing suspicion. By dinner, the women had found numerous points of connection, from discussing designers who actually made beautiful clothes for curvy bodies to sharing experiences of maintaining independence around powerful men. Dante watched their animated conversation with poorly concealed pleasure. Imani caught glimpses of a lighter side to him she'd never seen before, especially when Sophia teased him about childhood mishaps. Later that evening, Sophia found Imani alone in the kitchen. Walk with me, she requested, leading them to the mansion's rear garden. I need to tell you something about my brother, Sophia said, as they strolled between manicured hedges. After our mother died, Dante raised me himself. He was barely an adult, already carrying enormous responsibilities, but he never let me feel unloved or unprotected. She stopped, turning to face Imani directly. In all these years, he's never brought a woman into his inner circle, never shared business decisions or private spaces. You're the first, and that tells me everything I need to know about how special you are to him." When they returned inside, Dante was waiting in his study with architectural plans spread across his desk. He revealed designs for renovating Sweet Home, expanding the space while carefully preserving its original character and soul food heritage. "Once we resolve our security issues," he explained, "you could split your time between here and the restaurant, build both parts of your life." For the first time, Imani saw a future that didn't require choosing between her world and his. The plans honored her grandmother's legacy while embracing their shared future. The next morning, Sophia hugged Imani warmly before departing. "Take care of him," she whispered. "He needs someone who sees past the power to the person." After Sophia's car disappeared through the gates, Dante led Imani to a secure room filled with maps and territory charts. He shared his vision for restructuring neighborhood control to benefit her old community, genuinely seeking her input on local needs and concerns. As they worked together, their dynamic felt completely natural, two people combining different perspectives and strengths toward shared goals. That evening, lying in bed, Dante pulled her close. "I never imagined sharing any of this with anyone," he murmured against her hair. "My business, my private thoughts, my life. Not until you." Imani's heart raced at this confession, equal parts thrilled and terrified, as she recognized her deepening feelings for him. She was falling in love with a man whose world still held dangers she couldn't ignore, but whose trust and partnership had become essential to her own sense of self. 2 days after Sophia's departure, the kitchen hummed with afternoon activity as Imani prepared an elaborate dinner menu. The familiar rhythm of chopping vegetables and monitoring simmering pots helped quiet her mind, still processing the evolving complexity of her relationship with Dante. Through the partially open door to the adjacent room, Marco's hushed voice caught her attention. He spoke rapidly in Italian, a language she'd begun studying secretly through phone apps during sleepless nights. Though far from fluent, certain phrases jumped out clearly. "La chef nera," the black chef, and "domani sera," tomorrow night. The suspicious tone made her pulse quicken. Moving silently closer to the door while continuing to stir a sauce, Imani strained to catch more details. Marco's voice dropped even lower, but she distinctly heard Russians and what sounded like meeting coordinates. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone, typing the fragments she'd understood, along with the time and date. Later that evening, she slipped the note into a hollow space behind the baseboards in her room, a hiding spot she'd discovered weeks ago during her initial escape attempts. Sleep eluded her as she replayed the conversation, trying to piece together its significance. The next morning, Dante kissed her goodbye before departing for a major meeting with allied families. "I'll be back for dinner," he promised, his hand lingering on her cheek. Marco's staying behind to coordinate security. Something in Marco's expression as Dante left made Imani's skin crawl. Throughout the morning, she noticed disturbing changes in the mansion's usual routine. Unfamiliar guards appeared at key posts, while men she recognized were sent on vague errands off-property. The normal shift changes happened at irregular times, creating gaps in coverage that wouldn't be obvious unless someone was watching carefully. By afternoon, Imani's anxiety had reached a fever pitch. She couldn't directly contact Dante without alerting Marco. All communications went through him during off-site meetings. Instead, she documented every suspicious detail she noticed, including names and times, in a second note. Her eyes fell on the antique peppermill displayed prominently in the kitchen, a beautifully carved wooden piece that Dante often admired during their meals together. He'd told her it reminded him of one his grandmother had used in Sicily. With careful movements that appeared natural to any watching cameras, Imani unscrewed the top and slipped her rolled note inside before replacing it. As sunset approached, her unease grew stronger. Through the kitchen windows, she spotted 3 black SUVs she didn't recognize parked near the service entrance. The vehicles lacked the usual security team's distinctive logos, and the men moving around them carried themselves differently than Dante's personnel. Imani was adding final touches to the dinner preparations when the attack came. The kitchen door burst open, admitting 4 masked men with obvious Russian accents. Her training kicked in instantly. She grabbed a knife from the magnetic strip and hurled it, catching the first attacker in the shoulder. Spinning toward the stove, she grabbed a pot of boiling stock and flung it at 2 others, their screams echoing as the scalding liquid found gaps in their tactical gear. But there were too many. As she fought to reach the panic button under the counter, strong arms grabbed her from behind. She slammed her head backward, feeling cartilage crunch as she broke someone's nose, but a sharp prick in her neck brought immediate dizziness. As consciousness faded, Imani focused on one crucial act. She knocked the peppermill from its shelf, ensuring it landed near obvious signs of struggle. The antique rolled across the floor, stopping where it would clearly signal foul play rather than voluntary departure. Her last thought before blackness took her was a prayer that Dante would understand its significance. The warehouse air was thick with dust and industrial chemicals when Imani regained consciousness. She found herself bound to a metal chair, head pounding from the drugs. As her vision cleared, she recognized Viktor Sokolov, the Russian boss who'd tried to borrow her at the gathering. Marco stood beside him, mask finally dropped to reveal his true allegiance. "Welcome back, Ms. Jackson," Victor said smoothly. "We have much to discuss about your situation with Dante Ricci." He nodded to Marco, who placed a thick folder in Imani's lap. Inside were documents dated from before she'd witnessed the murder, detailed plans for her elimination, surveillance photos, contingency options. Her hands shook as she recognized Dante's signature, on orders to remove the witness permanently. "He changed his mind only after seeing your photo and background check," Victor explained almost gently. "Found you more interesting alive than dead." Marco stepped forward with building permits and property documents. "The restaurant was always marked for demolition," he said. "The development plans were filed weeks before he saved it for you. The paid mortgage was just theater, making you feel indebted, while he prepared to destroy your grandmother's legacy anyway." Imani stared at the evidence in her hands, each page landing like a physical blow. Victor pulled up a chair, sitting close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. "You have a choice," he said. "Testify about Dante's operations to federal authorities. We have contacts ready. You'll get witness protection, a new identity, complete freedom, or stay loyal to a man who planned to kill you and still intends to erase your family's legacy." He stood, straightening his suit jacket. "You have until morning to decide. Consider carefully. Which betrayal can you live with?" Guards led Imani to a sparse room with a narrow bed. Alone, she spread the documents across the mattress, examining each page with trembling fingers, desperately searching for any detail that might contradict this devastating revelation. Dawn painted the Chicago skyline in shades of blood when Dante's Maserati roared through the mansion's gates. The security breach alerts had started an hour ago, but poor cell reception during his meeting had delayed the messages. His jaw clenched at the chaos greeting him. Medical teams treating injured guards, shell casings marking violence in his sanctuary. The kitchen bore testament to Imani's resistance. Overturned pots, scattered knives, and scalding liquid still pooled on the floor told a story of fierce fighting. Pride mixed with fury as he noted two of the injured attackers bore wounds from kitchen implements. "Sir," one of his men approached cautiously, "there's no trace of—" "Show me the security footage," Dante cut him off, his voice terrifyingly quiet. In his study, he watched the attack unfold from multiple angles, his expression growing darker with each frame. A junior associate cleared his throat. Given her background, perhaps she arranged... Dante's hand closed around the man's throat before he could finish the suggestion. "Choose your next words carefully, he whispered, gray eyes promising death. Only his consigliere's intervention prevented murder. As he released the gasping man, something caught Dante's eye in the kitchen footage. Imani's deliberate movements around the peppermill, the way she ensured it fell during the struggle. The antique had been their private joke, a piece of Sicily she'd learned to appreciate. He retrieved the mill personally, finding the carefully rolled note inside. His hands shook slightly as he read Imani's documented suspicions about Marco, including overheard conversations and suspicious security changes. The betrayal cut deep. Marco had been his right hand for 15 years. "Find him," Dante ordered, his calm voice making hardened killers flinch. "Every communication, every movement, every breath he's taken in the last month, and find me a Russian who knows where they're keeping her." Within hours, they had 3 low-level Russian associates in the mansion's soundproofed basement. Dante removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves with surgical precision. "This can be quick or endless," he informed them. "Your choice." Meanwhile, Imani sat cross-legged on her prison cot, documents spread before her like puzzle pieces. Something wasn't adding up in Marco's supposedly damning evidence. The original development permits dated before she met Dante showed Sweet Home demolished. True enough, but subsequent modifications told a different story. She traced the amendments with her finger: structural reinforcement for the historic building, expanded kitchen facilities, preservation of the original facade while modernizing the interior. These changes were filed after their relationship began, transforming destruction into restoration. The bathroom's harsh fluorescent light, flickered as she examined the cleaning supplies she'd been gathering. Basic chemistry from culinary school told her which combinations would create chaos-inducing smoke. She waited until she heard the guard's footsteps approaching with her meal. The smoke billowed quickly once she mixed the chemicals. As the guard burst in, she was ready with the toilet tank lid. One decisive swing, and she had his weapon. The warehouse erupted into confusion as alarms blared. Imani moved purposefully through the corridors, wielding a broken mop handle like a staff. Her grandmother would have been proud of how she used everyday objects as weapons. Caustic cleaning solution in one guard's eyes, a well-placed strike to another's knee. The industrial district's familiar graffiti made her pause as she slipped outside. She was barely 2 miles from Sweet Home. The temptation to seek police protection warred with her growing understanding of Dante's actions. The building permits revealed someone who'd changed course after meeting her, who'd chosen to preserve rather than destroy. Across town, Dante extracted Marco's location from a screaming Russian lieutenant. The intelligence led them to a safe house in Bridgeport. Marco's security detail lasted seconds against Dante's focused assault. "You disappoint me, old friend," Dante said softly, standing over his former second-in-command. "Now tell me where she is." Through bloodied lips, Marco revealed Victor's plan. Federal testimony followed by disposal once Imani served her purpose. The information extracted, Dante ensured Marco's end matched his betrayal. Imani crouched behind a dumpster, watching Russian search teams comb the area. Her childhood knowledge of these alleys kept her one step ahead, but she was running out of options. The sound of approaching vehicles drew her attention, Dante's distinctive black SUVs approaching from the west. She slipped into an abandoned textile factory just as gunfire erupted between the opposing forces. Through a broken window, she caught glimpses of the battle. Dante moved through the chaos like an avenging angel, his actions controlled yet lethal. But his eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, searching for her, rather than focusing solely on eliminating enemies. The look of naked concern on his face whenever he checked a new area decided her. Grabbing a piece of broken mirror, she caught the morning sunlight and flashed it briefly, a signal meant only for him. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and the transformation in his expression told her everything she needed to know. Whatever his original intentions, the man looking at her now with such profound relief was one whose plans had been completely derailed by love. Gunfire ricocheted off brick walls as Dante moved with lethal precision toward Imani's position. His usually immaculate suit was stained with blood, none of it his own. 3 Russians tried to block his path. They died before hitting the ground, his movements so fluid it almost looked like deadly choreography. Imani held her ground in the abandoned textile factory, heart pounding as she watched him approach. The moment he reached her, Dante pulled her into a crushing embrace, his body shielding her from stray bullets. "I thought." His voice cracked slightly before he regained control. "Are you hurt?" "No, but we need to move. Victor's sending reinforcements." She gestured toward approaching vehicles. Dante's hand found the small of her back, guiding her through the chaos with practiced efficiency. They reached a matte black Audi, chosen for its bulletproof. Modifications rather than flash. As bullets pinged off the reinforced glass, Dante sped them through back streets, taking an erratic route to shake any tail. They ended up at a modest apartment building in Ukrainian village, a safe house even Marco didn't know about. The small unit was spartanly furnished but clearly fortified, with reinforced doors and shuttered windows. The moment the door closed behind them, Imani spun to face him. "I need the truth, all of it. Victor showed me the original orders after I witnessed the murder. He showed me the development plans for Sweet Home." Dante didn't try to deflect. His gray eyes met hers directly. "Yes. My first instinct was to eliminate the witness. And yes, I had plans to develop that entire block, including demolishing your restaurant." The confirmation hit her like a physical blow. So, everything Victor said was true. The beginning of the story, yes, but not how it changed. Dante moved to a hidden safe, retrieving a thick folder. "Look at these." He spread out architectural drawings dated just weeks ago. The plans showed Sweet Home not only preserved but expanded, its historic facade maintained while the interior was modernized. The soul food restaurant remained the centerpiece of a revitalized block. And this. He produced legal documents transferring ownership of the entire block to her name, signed well before her kidnapping. "I wanted it to be a surprise. You weren't just some witness to eliminate anymore. You became everything." Imani traced the drawings with trembling fingers. "When did this change? Why?" "You did." His voice softened. "Your strength, your defiance, your brilliance. You earned my respect first, then my desire, then something I never thought possible, my trust. The plans changed because you changed me." Before she could respond, Dante's secure phone buzzed. His expression darkened as he read the message. Victor's put bounties on both our heads. Every mercenary and hitman in Chicago will be hunting us. We need to move. Imani's mind raced through possibilities. I know these neighborhoods better than they do. There are routes they won't expect. They slipped out through a service entrance just as the first hunters arrived. Imani guided them through a maze of alleys and abandoned lots, using knowledge gained from years of navigating the South Side. When they encountered a Russian patrol, Dante's lethal efficiency combined with Imani's unexpected resourcefulness. One enforcer got behind Dante, weapon raised. Without hesitation, Imani grabbed her chef's knife from her boot and threw it with the precision born from years of knife work, the blade embedded in the attacker's throat. Dante stared at her with new appreciation as they retrieved her knife. You continue to surprise me. I'm not just someone to protect. She cleaned her blade with professional care. I'm your partner. They made it to Dante's most secure compound, an unmarked warehouse complex with state-of-the-art security. His most trusted captains had already gathered, faces grim as they reported on Victor's movements. Dante silenced their updates with a raised hand. Before we plan our response, understand this. The organization's structure is changing. Imani isn't just under my protection. She's my equal partner and future wife. Her strategic insight and different perspective are assets we need. A capo named Giuseppe shifted uncomfortably. With all respect, boss, taking orders from an outsider, especially a Choose your next words carefully, Dante interrupted, voice soft but deadly. I'm offering you one chance to leave the organization intact. That mercy itself should show you how things are changing. Giuseppe swallowed whatever he'd planned to say, nodding stiffly. Any other concerns? Dante surveyed the room. When no one spoke, he continued. Good. Now let's discuss how we're going to handle our Russian problem. Imani, what's your assessment of Victor's weaknesses? The private dining room at Alinea, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, gleamed with understated luxury. Crystal glasses caught the warm lighting, casting prismatic shadows across crisp, white tablecloths. Dante sat at the head of the long table, radiating calm authority while Imani stood beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. Viktor Sokolov entered with his usual arrogant stride, but faltered slightly when he saw the room's other occupants. Representatives from every major family in Chicago sat waiting. The Calabresi, the outfit, even delegates from New York's 5 families. This wasn't the private negotiation he'd expected. What is this? Victor demanded, his accent thickening with anger. Your last chance at peace, Dante replied evenly. Sit. Victor remained standing, his eyes darting between faces he recognized as powerful allies he'd hoped to turn against Dante. I was under the impression this would be a private discussion. These families have already accepted our new partnership, Imani spoke up, her voice carrying the same quiet authority as Dante's. They understand the future we're building. Don Calabresi, elderly but sharp-eyed, nodded. The world changes, Victor. Those who don't adapt get left behind. Or buried, added Michael Antonelli from the outfit, taking a deliberate sip of wine. Victor's face reddened. You expect me to take orders from— Choose your next words carefully, Dante interrupted. They may be your last. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Imani moved to stand directly beside Dante, their united front unmistakable. Victor looked around the room once more, reading the shifting political landscape in the stern faces of Chicago's most powerful criminals. Your choice is simple, Dante continued. Acknowledge our legitimacy and maintain peaceful business relations, or face total war, not just with me, but with every family represented here. Victor's shoulders slumped slightly as the fight drained from him. He pulled out a chair and sat heavily, reaching for the wine. Perhaps I have been unreasonable. Perhaps, Dante agreed mildly. Now, shall we discuss new territorial arrangements that benefit everyone? The meeting proceeded smoothly after that, with Victor signing agreements that would maintain peace while subtly reducing his influence. Throughout the negotiations, the other families watched Dante and Imani work in perfect tandem, her strategic insights complementing his tactical experience, her diplomatic touch softening his hard edges. 6 months later, Sweet Home's grand reopening drew celebrities, food critics, and Chicago's elite. The historic building had been lovingly restored, its original character enhanced rather than erased. Inside, traditional soul food classics shared menu space with innovative fusion dishes that honored the cuisine's roots while pushing culinary boundaries. The kitchen ran with military precision under Imani's leadership, her staff handpicked and fiercely loyal. The dining room buzzed with energy as guests discovered why Sweet Home had become the city's hardest reservation to secure. In the private back room, after closing, Imani sat reviewing the night's success. The space was intimate, with exposed brick walls and vintage photos of her grandmother's original restaurant. Dante entered quietly, watching her with undisguised admiration. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said softly. Imani smiled, thinking of how far they'd come. Behind the scenes, Dante had reorganized his entire empire with her as his partner in all decisions. Their relationship had become legendary in the underworld, the brutal mafia boss and the fearless chef who'd transformed him. Dante moved closer, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I have something for you." He produced a small black velvet box, and Imani's breath caught. With fluid grace, he knelt before her, an act of submission the notorious crime boss would show no other living soul. Opening the box revealed a stunning black diamond ring, its dark brilliance matching the uniqueness of their love story. The setting was both elegant and unconventional, like Imani herself. "You saw me at my darkest and chose to stay," Dante said, his voice rough with emotion. "You saw the monster everyone feared and found something worth loving. You made me want to be better while accepting who I am. Now I'm yours completely." Tears glimmered in Imani's eyes as she took in the significance of this moment. The ring represented more than just marriage. It symbolized their improbable journey from captive and captor to true partners in every sense. Looking at Dante, this dangerous, complex man who'd surrendered his heart to her, Imani realized they'd created something neither had thought possible. Their love had transformed Chicago's most feared man into someone capable of real partnership, while allowing her to embrace her own strength without compromising her principles. She touched his face gently, seeing past the ruthless exterior to the man who'd changed his entire world to make space for her in it. The man who'd protected her restaurant's legacy while building a new one together. The man now kneeling before her, offering his complete devotion. "Yes," she whispered, allowing him to slide the ring onto her finger. The black diamond caught the light, scattering shadows and brilliance like their life together. Darkness and light, power and tenderness, perfectly balanced. Dante stood, pulling her into his arms. They stayed that way for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet back room of the restaurant where their story had begun. Through violence and betrayal, through transformation and triumph, they'd forged something rare and precious, a love strong enough to change them both while accepting them exactly as they were.